Tonight on Primetime Politics, fast-tracking a new GST rebate.
Now, if you work here, you know that that's lightning speed.
Conservatives and other opposition MPs agree to accelerate the government's new grocery and basic needs benefit, despite past concerns the measure does not go far enough to help Canadians. Coming up, Conservative Deputy Leader Melissa Lantsman will explain why her party is now working with the government. Also, Pierre Poilievre more than survives a leadership review, but how much leeway does he really have? We'll find out what the numbers tell us with Abacus Data's David Coletto. And
you're about to make several 100,000 Albertans into criminals.
Alberta Premier Danielle Smith and why she thinks Ottawa is still failing her province. This is Primetime Politics. Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Serapio. Well, the new GST credit for groceries is one step closer to becoming a reality, with MPs all agreeing to fast-track the measure that was announced last week by Prime Minister Carney. Now, that means the government's Canada Groceries and Essential Benefit Act could clear the House by Wednesday, despite comments made last week by Conservatives criticizing the measure for not being enough. Well, joining us now is Melissa Lantsman. Ms. Lantsman is the Deputy Leader of the Conservative Party. Ms. Lantsman, thank you for the time.
Thanks so much for having me.
You know, just last week, your House Leader called this rebate a recycled Trudeau-era policy. Do you no longer believe that?
Well, that's exactly what it is. You know, whether you get the $10 from the top-up on your $320 grocery bills, no one's going to say no to that $10 coupon if they gave it to you at the door. But this is a recycled policy, because it's exactly what it is. We saw this same finance minister, who was industry minister at the time, telling you in 2023 that the price of groceries would stabilize. He called in all of the CEOs into Ottawa. He said that he would blow out competition and put in some affordability measures. And here we are today with the highest grocery inflation in the G7. And that's not a record to be proud of.
So why fast track this measure then?
Well, first of all, Canadians are struggling from coast to coast to coast with the price of groceries. If you're a young family trying to put food on the table, if you're a senior that's worked their entire lives, there's 2.2 million people lined up at a food bank. So, of course, we're going to pass through the measures, but that doesn't get to the crux of the problem. The crux of the problem is that grocery prices have continued to go up under successive Liberal prime ministers, first under Trudeau, and now double the inflation under Carney.
Okay, so if you're fast-tracking it with all the arguments that you're making, are you getting anything in return from the government? Because while they have put forward this rebate, your party talks about a cut to the industrial tax or the tax on single-use plastic, which Conservatives argue are contributors to higher food costs.
Oh, we argue that because it's true. The industrial carbon tax, the $1 billion of packaging taxes that are put on top of groceries that consumers pay for, the 17-cent a liter fuel standard, which is which increases the price of gas for the truckers that bring the food to the grocery store and then pass down to the consumer that buys it. We want to see real relief for Canadians.
Okay, but is the government signaling that they'll take on any of those other measures?
Well, they certainly defeated our motion. We're going to bring forward another motion on groceries tomorrow, so they'll have the opportunity to support real relief for Canadians and not just the Band-Aid solutions of a $10 coupon a week for a family, and not even all families. And let's not forget that they just put a budget down on the table less than a month ago. The ink isn't even dry, and this is yet another $12 billion of unaccounted spending, which will again drive the inflationary pressures, and as a result, cost Canadians even more. So they're actually not dealing with the issues, but we're not going to stand in the way of relief for Canadians.
Okay, so that is your calculus. You're not standing in the way of relief for Canadians. Does that mean then that Conservatives are willing to support other measures that the government is trying to forward, where the two might dovetail? For example, bail reform or hate crime legislation.
Well, we've been asking for them to put bail reform on the table for now what seems to be years. It was them that was blocking their own legislation at committee. They finally decided to put aside the assault on freedom in C9 and bring forward bail reform. And look, it's not everything that we want, but it is a step in the right direction. But we can't expect that the government, who is responsible for the weak bail system that has allowed repeat violent offenders to be churned out on the streets at the cost of victims, to fix their own problems. But again, we're not going to stand in the way of things that get us there. And remember, this was our idea. We ran on it. So if they want to take our ideas, they should take them all the way.
Okay, but even if they are not doing as much as you'd like vis-a-vis bail and putting forward this bill, can we expect Conservatives to support the current Liberal bail package?
Yes, look, certainly we're in committee right now. I don't want to presuppose the work of the committee, but they're going to hear from witnesses and they're going to hear from the minister. They're going to try to make it better. Look, there is 8 million Canadians that sent us to Ottawa to oppose the government where it needs to be opposed, to provide solutions, and to expose what they're not telling you. And so there's a job to do on the table, and I'm glad that they finally put bail on the table for us to be able to do that.
Okay, so fast-tracking this measure on the GST, open to what the Liberals have to do on bail. You know, how much of this is politics that we're seeing at play? Conservatives supporting these types of measures so that the party cannot be called obstructionist, which Liberals have done in the past? Well, look, there's obstructionism in Parliament, which the Liberals claim is the way that we're operating, and we're just saying to Canadians, you elected us to get certain things done. We put it in an election platform. 8 million Canadians voted for us to do that, and we're going to make sure that we can work with the government where we can, and where we can't, we're going to propose different solutions, which hopefully the government will take. All of this was what Canadians proposed, and it's the Liberals that are putting this now on the table. So it would be hard for me to sit here and say that we're not going to support the ideas that we just ran on. Okay, Melissa Lantsman, always appreciate the time. Thank you for that.
Thanks so much.
Time now for a look at what else happened in politics today.
The one thing about this world, whether we like it or not, we are living in an age of nationalism everywhere, revived nationalism. And there is no reason why this country should not be as nationalistic as anyone else. We have a lot to be proud of. It's a tremendous country. I think just about any person and almost anywhere in the world would love to be here, to have the circumstances of our country. Well, we have a great history. Obviously, we have a great land, a tremendous, gift of Providence. Great land, but we have a great history. And, there's been so much emphasis in the past, let's say, decade, about all the things we've done wrong. Okay, fine. But look, all the things we've done wrong have been things that like the things we've done right, that we have built upon. We've corrected mistakes, and we've built, I think, quote Mr. Chrétien, the best country in the world.
We're political opponents, but we're not enemies, not today, anyway. And because he's afraid of the Shawinigan.
Former Prime Minister Stephen Harper received a gold medal from the Royal Geographic Society, and after receiving that award today, sat down for a fireside chat with former Prime Minister Jean Chrétien. Together, they joked and shared their thoughts on Canadian sovereignty and national pride. The award to Harper is for his distinguished career in public service. Tomorrow, Mr. Harper's official portrait will be unveiled on Parliament Hill. Also, Canada's former Defence Minister and Minister for Public Safety is vacating his seat in the House of Commons. Bill Blair stepping down from a seat in Toronto that he's held since 2015 to assume the role as Canada's new High Commissioner to the United Kingdom. Blair's resignation means Liberals are now back to 169 sitting members in the House. He is expected to start his new job this spring. And that is not all. National Security and Intelligence Advisor to the Prime Minister, Nathalie Drouin, has also been named to a new position. She will be Canada's next ambassador to France. Well, Pierre Poilievre is back in Ottawa after securing the support of his party this weekend, winning 87.4% approval from party members after delivering a speech Friday evening in which he championed conservative policies and criticized the Carney Liberals.
After 10 years of Liberal rule, Canada is more costly and crime-ridden, dangerous and dependent and divided than ever before. Now, Mr. Carney, he promised to change all that. But here we are a year later. You know, what's changed? Sure, the words have changed, the style has changed, but what's changed in your life, really?
Well, joining us now is David Coletto, the founder and the CEO of Abacus Data. Hello, David.
Good to see you, Michael. How are you doing?
And you. I'm good, thank you. So we now have Pierre Poilievre surpassing even Stephen Harper by securing more than 87% of his party's support. But, you know, it has been suggested by some, among them Jason Kenney, that the support was not entirely enthusiastic. So how secure can Poilievre feel in his position right now?
I mean, you're never fully secure, especially after you've lost, two members of parliament crossing over to the Liberals prior to the end of the year. So I think there's always a risk there. But I do think that, this reflects two things that we know from our own polling. And that one is that, Pierre Poilievre finds wide appeal, lots of enthusiasm among the base of the Conservative Party. And two, there doesn't appear to be anyone else that can do what he's done, which right now is keep that base united. So yes, he's got probably some challenges in growing the Conservative universe, but he has done a good job in keeping that, 40% or so of Canadians who voted Conservative last year still rallying around the Conservative Party, even as Mark Carney becomes more popular in the context that we're in.
Mark Carney growing more popular in what we're seeing right now. But, you talked about growing the Conservative vote here, and we didn't see anything new in terms of policy from Poilievre. Instead, we saw, certainly on Friday night's speech at least, a slight change in tone. Is that enough to turn around the impression Canadians have of this Conservative leader?
I don't know for sure, but I think unlikely. Any reputation work I do is once somebody has a negative impression of you as a person, a brand, an institution, it's very hard to change. It requires them to look at you through an entirely different lens. And unless the world fundamentally changes, I think that's going to be really hard for Pierre Poilievre to achieve. Now, that doesn't mean you need to love somebody to vote for them. You just need to believe that they're the best alternative, or that the alternative, in this case, let's say Mark Carney, is less desirable than he is. So everything operates not in a vacuum in comparison. And so there is, I think, a path that you could imagine Pierre Poilievre winning an election, even if he's not the most beloved federal party leader, or even in the case of the question on who makes best PM, he overtakes Mark Carney in the future on something like that.
And what's that path for Mark Carney to not deliver on the promises he's made?
I think that's part of it. I think people need to feel far less confident and trustworthy in Mark Carney. He's doing quite well on those measures right now. I think, other scenarios would be the economy gets significantly worse, people's anxiety around jobs or the cost of living continues to rise. These are areas where the Conservatives typically do well. Concerns around immigration, around crime, those are the issues that the Conservatives often win on. And we've known from the past year that any time that the public's attention to Donald Trump dissipates, we see the Conservative vote share go up. And so, yeah, those are the kinds of things that need to happen. It's not all going to be on Pierre Poilievre's own that he can change the direction. It also, I think, will require highly likely that the New Democrats do better than they did in April of last year, if the Conservatives are going to find a way to get back into a place where they can win again.
So a complicated calculus, if you will, to make that happen. And, I want to pick up a bit on the polling that you did going into the Conservative convention, because your research, it indicated that, that there does exist a divide between the Conservative base and Canadians outside that base when it comes to issues. And during the convention, we saw issues like conversion therapy and gender-affirming surgeries come up for debate. They didn't pass, but they came up for debate amongst the grassroots. So what kind of challenge does that present for Conservatives and Pierre Poilievre if he is looking to broaden his coalition?
Well, I think, first it shows just how diverse a coalition the Conservative Party is today. It includes social conservatives, cultural conservatives, economic conservatives, and they all, stitch together to build a complicated and at sometimes, conflicting quilt, if I'm going to use that analogy. But here's the challenge, I think, and it's not one that only Pierre Poilievre faces. I think this has been a problem facing Conservative politicians for a long time at the national level, is how, if you try to moderate, if you try to move away from what the base wants, the tone, the focus, the attention that they want you to pay on some issues, and you try to reach out to that middle, the so-called, accessible voter that exists for the Conservatives, there's risk you demotivate or you alienate or you push some of those conservative, hardcore conservatives to someone else, as we saw in the 2021 federal election, where I think many left the O'Toole Conservative Party and went and embraced Max Bernier at the People's Party. So you have this really difficult task of keeping your base together, which compared to the Liberals or the New Democrats is the largest. They've got a really high floor, but in doing so, you do risk that ceiling comes down quite a bit. And that is the constant paradox, I think, that's faced Stephen Harper, Andrew Scheer, and Erin O'Toole, and now Pierre Poilievre since the two parties merged in 2003.
Yeah, and add to that, and again, I'm quoting your survey to you, was it 1 in 5 Conservatives approve of Mark Carney's performance as Prime Minister?
Yeah, and that's the other context. This is not Justin Trudeau. This is not a Prime Minister in which only 12% of Canadians think that the government and the party in power deserve to be reelected. It's one that I would describe as right now quite popular. And so, it's an environment that no opposition leader has an easy, ability to add in the external threat that Donald Trump plays. And this is a really tough job right now. I think we have to just keep in mind that any opposition leader would be facing a number of obstacles to overcome when you have a popular prime minister and this external threat. And now other threats like Alberta separation in Quebec, these are all things that I think play to Mark Carney's strengths and force the comparison with Pierre Poilievre that doesn't always end favorably for him.
Okay. David, thank you for this. Appreciate the time. David Coletto of Abacus Data.
Thanks, Michael.
Okay, let's stay with the Conservative Convention. On Saturday, I spoke with Alberta Premier Danielle Smith about the speech she gave that day, a speech in which Smith praised Pierre Poilievre. And it had me wondering what more the current Prime Minister could be doing to address concerns being raised by Premier Smith and the issues being raised by Alberta separatists. Here is a part of our conversation. What would you tell the Prime Minister right now, or perhaps what you've already told the Prime Minister, in terms of what he needs to do to not only address the concerns of your province, but really at this point in time address Albertans who may be thinking of signing that petition to have a referendum?
Well, as I mentioned, when I see polls that show 30% or more of Albertans that are prepared to end our relationship with Canada, I know that it's my job to give them hope, and I've told the Prime Minister exactly the same thing. I think part of that has been partially restored with the MOU that we signed in November, and we worked very hard on that, and we're continuing to work to implement it. We're going to do our part to put in a proposal in June for a bitumen pipeline to the BC coast. We had a nice trilateral meeting with David Eby, so we're trying to come to terms with how we negotiate and consult with the First Nations and what their role will be. So that's one piece of it, and so I think that is moving along well. But quite frankly, the person who heads the movement is a gun shop owner, and when you look at the gun grab, which is unfair, it doesn't make any sense. The category of weapons they've created is a fantasy one. We don't have military assault weapons in Canada. We have had those banned for many years, but something that looks ugly has now been determined to be illegal, and you're about to make several 100,000 Albertans into criminals. And so that is very motivating for people when I tell them there's nothing I can do about that. That's federal jurisdiction. And that's, I think, one of the things he's got to address. It may be popular in Quebec, and I understand their unique circumstance about the tragedy that they had with Polytechnique. But I would say that in Alberta, we understand that a firearm purchase legally is a tool. It's a tool for it's a tool for ranchers and farmers. It's a tool for hunters and for sport shooters and collectors. It's very important for them. They've invested tens of thousands of dollars, and for a federal government to come along and just say, "Give us your guns, we'll pay you a portion of the cost, and if you don't, we'll make you a criminal." I'm sorry, that's just not a persuasive argument. So if you want to understand why the MOU has not been sufficient, it's issues like that.
Does the Prime Minister hear you when you say that?
I don't know. I guess we'll see. We've got the end of the amnesty period for the buyback in March. And I think at that point, whatever he collects, I hope he says, it's been successful enough and we're not going to go any further. Or maybe he'll just say we'll go further in Quebec. But we've heard the pleas of the rest of the country not to go down this path. We want him to go down the path that Bill 14 has, which is criminal justice reform that all of us have been asking for a very long time. Keep the bad guys behind bars. Don't have the revolving door of criminals coming out and hurting people. If you want to talk about guns, go to the borders and stop illegal guns from coming in and getting into the hands of organized crime and criminals. And that, to me, is the way you build consensus. Let's focus on things that are going to make a real difference to public safety. Okay.
Well, you mentioned Premier Eby, so I'm going to go back to the MOU right now because obviously you had a meeting with the BC Premier along with the Prime Minister about trying to move this MOU forward because the Prime Minister, for his part, at least he said so in French last week, that there will be a pipeline. Probably his clearest words that he said on that topic. But how close are you to getting David Eby on side?
Well, I think for the Premier, we always focus on the things we agree on, and there's so many, because he's supportive of the expansion of the Trans Mountain Pipeline, supportive of interties so that we can leverage our solar and wind resources with his hydro resources and perhaps bring nuclear on stream, supportive of the development of Port of Prince Rupert and perhaps ammonia being an option to go out that port, and LNG export, so there's lots of ground to start from. But I respect the fact that we have to do the consultation with the nations. And one of the first consultations I did with the Haisla around the Kitimat port, and it's clear to me that was perhaps an inappropriate port to put tankers through. You have a lot of navigation that you have to do through that channel. So what we're looking for is a deep water port right on the shore, so that we could avoid some of that environmental concern, but also to have a robust marine response and make sure that people understand how safe the new tankers are, but also make sure that we have a robust response in case there is any potential issue. I think that would go a long way to providing some certainty. And of course, the equity stake we think is vitally important for nations in both British Columbia and Alberta to have an equity stake in this line so that they have a long-term revenue stream in the hundreds of millions of dollars, which will make a dramatic difference to the lives of their people. Mm-hmm. So what's the process here? Explain this to me. Are you trying to find the port first, figure out the route, and then do consultation, or is it the other way around? Correct. We're finding the port. We're doing we're doing engagement at the same time. There's a different legal threshold when you move to consultation. We're doing engagement right now in relationship building along the likely routes. But we're looking at 5 different ports right now, and the feasibility will be released when we submit the application. But that target is in June.
Okay, the target is in June. Listen, I also want to get back to the referendum because at this point we're seeing people signing on. I was speaking to Rick Bell, and he says, there are those that are signing on because they want an independent Alberta. There are those that are just trying to send a message to Ottawa. That latter part in particular, does that mean necessarily, or at least do you interpret that as expect a referendum on this question?
It depends on whether they get the signatures that they need, because the first petition campaign, which really started all of this, let's remember about that. The first petition campaign was put forward as a yes/no question, and so we were that was what was being asked, and then the petitioner said, "Oh, please don't put it to the people." So it created a little bit of confusion about what to do about that. We're putting that to a committee. Meanwhile, this one has started up. If they get the requisite number of signatures, that'll send me the message that Albertans want to have a robust discussion about that. But I do always worry And we saw it with Brexit. I do always worry when people want to send a message that they overcorrect. And so that's why we have to get a number of things, a number of the issues that I've raised. We've got to get the dial moved on that. We've got to turn the page on the Trudeau era and make sure that Albertans can have hope again. And I think that we'd end up with a very positive result of people in my province believing Canada can work again. That's what I'm working towards.
Well, ahead of that, we have the party leader opposite you, Naheed Nenshi of the NDP, calling on every member of the Alberta legislature to sign a document in support of, or rather, denouncing Alberta's sovereignty. But you push back against that. Why?
Naheed Nenshi campaigned for Justin Trudeau. I think people need to understand that. So Justin Trudeau is the cause of our problems over the last 10 years. I think that the opposition leader is trying to distract from that fact. We are trying to work with both the opposition leader as well as the new prime minister to try to undo the damage that Trudeau caused to our province and the attacks on our province for 10 years. So Mr. Nenshi has to answer for his own record, and that's part of the reason he's pointing at us, because he doesn't want to tie himself to the support that he had for Trudeau all through those terrible years.
Are you opening yourself up to criticism of perhaps handling the separatist movement with kid gloves?
I look, as I mentioned, it's 1 million people. If you look at the polls, that 30%, and it maybe even more than that. And I have to take that seriously. People are hurt. I mean, I know it's hard to imagine, but we could have had an extra 2.5 million barrels a day of production in this province. By now, if all of those pipeline projects had gone ahead, if they'd been supported by our federal government instead of not only stymied, but actually canceled, 2.5 million barrels a day, $55 billion of additional GDP to our economy, we would have probably had $10 to $12 billion in additional revenue to pay for the schools and the hospitals and the roads. And that is what is frustrating. That's one part of it. But then all the job losses. When you cannot continue to grow your economy, our young people start looking elsewhere. We have a youth employment crisis, which rose to as high as 17%. And when you look around, young people not having the hope because of escalating prices, they don't believe that they can buy a house. They don't believe that they can afford to get married and have kids. It has real consequences when you devastate a province's economy. And what I read into that is Albertans have said, no, it's a hard red line. They're just not going to put up with it anymore. So let's work together to undo those bad policies. And I think that what we'll do is we'll be able to bring that hope to Albertans so that if there is a vote, that it's in favor of Canada.
The Alberta Premier Danielle Smith. Now you can see the full interview on the CPAC website and on our YouTube channel. I'm Michael Serapio. For everyone here at CPAC, thank you for joining us. Primetime Politics is back tomorrow. Until then, take care.